It was late in the afternoon, and I was cleaning my room when I heard the door make a noise. I turned around and saw Liam standing in the doorway looking at what I was holding. My heart raced. How could I explain this? The thing in my hands was not something easy to explain. It was a big, colorful toy that no one could ignore. I had taken it out of the drawer to clean behind the cabinet, not really thinking about it. I thought I had locked the door, but I guess I hadn't. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more true stories like this one. Also, don't forget to watch the whole video and like it, because this story is really interesting. Please click the like button to show your support. Liam was my 23-year-old stepson. He wasn't supposed to be home yet because he worked at a nearby brewery and usually stayed out with his friends after work. But there he was, tall and slim, with dark hair that fell into his playful blue eyes. "What's that?" he asked, his voice sounding both curious and a bit teasing. My face turned bright red. I dropped the item like it was burning me, quickly grabbing the first thing I could, a pillow from the bed, to cover it. "It's none of your business," I said, my voice shaky. But he didn't look surprised. He just leaned against the doorframe, looking even more curious. "You don't need to be so embarrassed," he said with a small smile. "It's not like I haven't seen something like that before." I just wanted to hide. How could he stand there so calmly, acting like everything was fine while I felt like my world was falling apart? I tried to laugh, even though I was nervous, hoping to change the subject. "Liam, seriously, go mind your own business. You shouldn't even be in here." But he didn't move. The silence felt heavy. He wasn't looking at the pillow anymore, but at me. His look was different, longer, more serious than usual. It felt like he was seeing something about me I hadn't expected. I felt a weird mix of warmth and guilt. This was wrong. I was his stepmom. I was married to his dad. I shook my head and broke the silence. "Please, Liam, just go." He finally shrugged, lifting his hands like he was giving up. Okay, he said, sounding light again. But before he left, he gave me one last look that made my already nervous thoughts spin. As the door closed behind him, I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the pillow against my chest. My heart was racing. I couldn't even bring myself to put the toy back in the drawer. It felt like something had changed between us, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I knew I'd never see Liam the same way again. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I tried to stay busy. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, and even sat next to Nathan on the couch while he watched old westerns on TV. But Liam's face, his smile, and the way his eyes had looked at me kept coming back to my mind. Nathan didn't notice I was distracted. He was busy with his hobbies: gardening, woodworking, crossword puzzles. Since he retired, I didn't feel angry about it. That would have been too simple. But sometimes, I felt more like a caretaker than a wife. At one point, I saw Liam's shadow moving around in his room. I could hear soft music playing, the low beat of the bass filling the quiet house. My heart raced for some reason I couldn't understand, so I turned my focus back to Nathan. He was softly snoring, his chin down, asleep in his recliner with the TV still on. I thought about waking him up, but what was the point? Instead, I got up and went to the kitchen, glad to have a quiet moment to myself. But it didn't last long. Liam came in, his bare feet making soft sounds on the hardwood floor. He wore a worn-out t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy like he had just run his hands through it. "Hey," he said, opening the fridge and grabbing a bottle of water. "You're up late," I said, trying to keep the conversation casual. He smiled and leaned against the counter. "Just unwinding. It's not easy living here." His comment made me stop for a moment. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged, but there was a seriousness in his expression. "It's nothing. Just living here again, I guess. I feel like I don't fit anymore." I softened. Even with everything that had happened, I couldn't help but feel a bit of motherly concern. "It's just temporary, Liam. You'll figure things out. You're smart and capable. You'll be fine." "Thanks, Sophia," he said, his voice gentler. "I appreciate that." For a moment, We stood in silence, and the kitchen felt smaller as the space between us seemed to shrink. He didn't look away, and I felt that same strange warmth in my chest. I cleared my throat and started wiping the counter, trying to break the tension. But Liam wasn't finished. "About earlier," he said, his voice playful again. "You don't have to be embarrassed, you know. We're all human, right?" My hand stopped, and I turned to look at him. "Liam, let's not talk about that, okay? It was an accident, and it's not something we need to bring up again." "Okay," he said, raising his hands like he was giving up. But there was still a teasing look in his smile that made my stomach flip. He walked past me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. I didn't turn around, but I could feel him standing there behind me before he finally left the kitchen. That night, as I lay in bed next to Nathan, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. What was I doing? I had always been able to keep clear boundaries, lines that weren't meant to be crossed. But Liam seemed to blur those lines without even trying. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I wanted him to stop. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I made breakfast like usual: eggs, toast, and coffee for Nathan, a smoothie for myself. Liam was the last to come into the kitchen, his hair still damp from the shower. He greeted Nathan with a casual morning and me with a warm smile that made my heart race. We sat at the table, the sound of silverware clinking and bits of conversation filling the space. But underneath it all, I could feel the tension. Every time Liam's hand brushed against mine while passing the salt or refilling my coffee, it felt like he meant to do it. I caught him looking at me more than once, his gaze steady and unreadable. Nathan, of course, didn't notice anything. After breakfast, Liam offered to help me clean up. Normally, he would have just gone to his room or out with friends, so his offer surprised me. "You don't have to," I said, stacking the plates in the sink. "I want to," he replied, already grabbing a dish rag. We worked in silence for a bit, but the air felt heavy. At one point, I reached for a glass at the same time he did, and our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled away. "You're different," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean?" I asked, my throat dry. He hesitated, looking into my eyes. "I don't know. You just don't act like other women your age." I laughed nervously, stepping back to put some space between us. "Well, that's flattering, I guess." "It's not just that," he continued. "You're real. You actually listen. You see people." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond, so I turned back to the dishes. But as I scrubbed, I could feel him standing close behind me again. My heart raced, and I hated how much I wanted him to stay there. Before I could collect my thoughts, Nathan's voice called from the living room. "Sophia, where's my crossword book?" The moment was broken, and Liam stepped back, giving me a small, knowing smile. "I'll let you get back to him," he said, his voice light as he walked away. I felt a mix of relief and longing. I knew I was playing with fire, but part of me couldn't resist reaching for the heat. That afternoon, I kept myself busy with errands, trying not to think about everything that had happened. But when I got home, I found Liam sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the yard. He seemed lost in thought, a long way from the confident young man I usually saw. "Hey," I said softly as I walked over. He looked up and gave a small smile. "Hey, everything okay?" I asked, sitting next to him, keeping some space between us, but close enough to feel his warmth. He paused before answering. "Yeah, just thinking about life, where I'm headed, what I should be doing." I couldn't help but feel a little sympathy. "You're young, Liam. You don't have to have it all figured out." He looked at me, his eyes still on the yard. After a brief silence, he said, "Do you ever feel like you're meant for something different? Like you're stuck in the wrong story?" His words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I wanted to comfort him, tell him everything would be okay, but the truth was I wasn't sure it would be. Instead, I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed gently. "You're not stuck," I said, hoping he wouldn't hear the shake in my voice. For a moment, His hand covered mine, and the simple touch felt more intimate than I wanted to admit. I quickly pulled my hand away, but it was too late. Another boundary crossed, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to stop it. Later that evening, the sky darkened, signaling a storm. The air felt heavy, like the world was waiting for something to happen. Nathan had gone to bed early, complaining of a sore shoulder. I settled into the living room with a book, but I couldn't focus. The storm outside felt like the restlessness I felt inside something unpredictable, something dangerous. I could hear Liam in the kitchen, the fridge opening and closing, followed by the soft clink of glass. A few moments later, he appeared in the doorway, 2 glasses in hand. "Whiskey?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I blinked, caught off guard. I don't usually drink this late. "Well, maybe tonight's an exception," he said with a grin, handing me a glass before I could respond. I hesitated but took it. The cool glass felt solid in my hand, giving me something to hold on to as Liam sank into the armchair across from me. The lamp beside me cast a warm light on his face, making the sharp lines of his jaw and the faint shadow of stubble stand out. "What are you reading?" he asked, nodding toward the book in my lap. "Just something light," I replied, holding the book up briefly. "Nothing exciting." He smirked. "I find that hard to believe." I laughed softly, taking a sip of the whiskey. The burn was a welcome distraction from the tension building in the room. We sat in silence for a while, the storm outside getting stronger. Then Liam spoke again, his voice low. "Can I ask you something?" I glanced at him, wary. "Depends on what it is." He swirled the liquid in his glass, his eyes focused on it like he was gathering his thoughts. "Do you ever feel stuck?" His question caught me off guard. It was so similar to the one he had asked earlier on the porch, but now there was a different weight to it. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice softer than I meant. Liam looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine. "You don't seem like someone who should be stuck. You're too alive for that." My cheeks flushed and I quickly looked away, setting my glass down on the coffee table. "Liam, you shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" he asked, his tone gentle but persistent. "It's true." His words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. I stood up quickly, needing space. "I think it's time we called it a night," I said, avoiding his gaze. But just as I turned to leave, the lights flickered and the power went out. The sudden darkness was disorienting, and I froze mid-step. "Oh," I muttered, my voice shaky. "It's just the storm," Liam said, calm as ever. "Hold on, I'll find a flashlight." I heard him move closer, the faint rustle of his clothes brushing past me. Then his hand brushed against mine in the dark, and I sucked in a sharp breath. "Sorry," he murmured, but he didn't pull away. His hand lingered, warm and steady against mine, and the air between us seemed to change. I couldn't move. My heart was pounding, and I felt like he could hear it too. One evening, while I was folding laundry in the guest room, Liam appeared in the doorway. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm. I didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is," he replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. I sighed, setting the laundry down and meeting his gaze. "Liam, whatever this is, it has to stop. It's not right." "Is it?" he asked, his voice challenging. "Because it doesn't feel wrong to me." His words made me uneasy, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You don't understand. If Nathan ever found out—" "He won't," Liam interrupted. "And even if he did, do you really think he'd care? He barely notices you anymore." His words stung, but I couldn't deny there was some truth to them. I had to stop this. "This isn't about him," I said, my voice rising. "It's about us. Whatever this is, it can't happen. It's not just wrong, it's impossible." Liam stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. "Why? Because you're afraid of what people will think? Because you're afraid of what you might think?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. My silence spoke for me. Sophia, he continued softly, I'm not trying to make this harder for you, but I can't pretend I don't feel something for you. And I don't think you can either. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I looked away. You don't understand, I whispered. Then explain it to me, he said, his voice steady. Please, explain it to me. But I couldn't explain it. I couldn't find the right words for the guilt, the confusion, the uncertainty I felt. So, I shook my head and pushed past him, leaving the room without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of Nathan's breathing. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, and I couldn't seem to untangle them. At some point, I got up and went to the kitchen, hoping a glass of water would calm my nerves. But as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Liam's door was open, and he was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, as if he had been waiting for me. Can't sleep? He asked, his voice soft. I nodded, unable to find my words. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the silence heavy between us. Then, without thinking, I turned and walked back to my room, closing the door behind me. But even as I lay back down, I knew this wasn't over. Whatever this was, this confusing, difficult situation between us, it wasn't going away. And deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted it to. The next time it happened, there wasn't a storm to blame, nor a flickering light to hide behind. This time, it was intentional. It started in the laundry room of all places. I was pulling warm towels from the dryer, the steady rhythm of folding them offering me a brief sense of calm. The house was quiet. Nathan had gone to a friend's house to watch a game, and I thought I had the place to myself. Then I heard the soft creak of the floorboards behind me. You're always working, Liam said, his voice light but with a tone I couldn't quite place. I didn't turn around. Someone has to, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. He chuckled softly. Fair enough. But don't you ever get tired of it? Tired of what? I asked, feeling confused. Taking care of everything. Taking care of everyone. When's the last time someone took care of you? His words hit me harder than I expected. I turned, clutching a folded towel to my chest like it was a barrier. Liam, I don't think this is a conversation we should be having. Why not? He asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. He looked at ease, but his eyes were focused, searching me in a way I wasn't used to. Because, I said, my voice faltering. It's not right. Appropriate? He repeated, as if testing the word. That's not the same as honest, though, is it? I wanted to argue, to stop him before things went any further. But before I could, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us. You don't have to pretend with me, Sophia, he said softly. I see you. I see how you manage everything here, keeping it all together while everyone else just takes. Don't you think you deserve a little something for yourself? My throat tightened and I shook my head, stepping back until I was at the edge of the counter. Liam, whatever this is, it has to stop. He reached out, brushing his hand lightly against mine. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like everything around me was shifting. Tell me you don't feel it too, he whispered softly. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. I couldn't lie to him, and I couldn't lie to myself. Then, like that night in the living room, he kissed me. This time, I didn't stop him. The next few days went by quickly, filled with secret moments and quiet whispers. We tried to be careful, or at least we thought we were. Liam found ways to be near me, helping with dinner, fixing a broken door, even offering to run errands with me. At first, it felt exciting, like something we shouldn't be doing. But soon, the truth hit me. I knew it wouldn't last. It was just a matter of time before everything fell apart. One afternoon, while I was putting away groceries, Liam came up behind me and hugged me around the waist. I tensed up and looked toward the doorway to make sure no one was around. Liam, I whispered, trying to pull away. Nathan could come in any second. Nathan's at the hardware store, he said calmly. Relax. But I couldn't relax, not anymore. I started feeling scared. Every time Nathan looked at me, I wondered if he knew. Every time Claire, our curious neighbor, waved at me from across the street, I felt like she could tell something was wrong. "We need to talk," I said, turning to face Liam. "About what?" he asked, his face hard to read. "About this," I said, my voice tight. "About us." Liam's jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw anger in his eyes. "What about us?" he asked, his voice low. "This has to stop," I said firmly. "I told you," I forced the words out. "It's too risky." "It's not fair to Nathan." "Fair to Nathan?" Liam repeated, his voice getting louder. "What about fair to you? Do you even hear yourself? You're so worried about him that you're not thinking about what you want." "What I want doesn't matter," I snapped. "It's not about me, Sophia," he fired back. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be with someone who really sees you." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I wanted to argue, to say he was wrong, but deep down, I knew he was right. A few weeks later, it all came to a head. Nathan invited Claire and her husband over for dinner, and I was trying to be the perfect host. But Claire's sharp eyes were on me all night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something. After dinner, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Claire cornered me. "You've been really distracted lately," she said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Just busy," I replied, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." She leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "Does Nathan know?" My heart stopped and I froze. "No," I said, barely able to speak. Claire shrugged, her face unreadable. "Whatever's going on with you and Liam." I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. "I don't know what you mean," I said, my voice trembling. Claire smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Just be careful, Sophia. Secrets always come out." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire's words. I felt trapped, stuck between two lives that could never mix. The next morning, Liam found me in the garden, pulling weeds harder than I needed to. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice calm but frustrated. "I'm trying to protect us," I replied, not looking at him. "Protect us from what?" he asked, stepping closer. "From this all falling apart," I said, standing up and wiping my hands on my jeans. "Claire knows." He frowned, his face darkening. "How could she know?" "I don't know, but she does," I said, my voice rising. "And if she tells Nathan—" "Nathan won't," he said firmly. "You don't know that," I snapped. "You don't understand how dangerous this is." Liam took my hand, his grip strong but not painful. "What I understand is that I don't want to lose you." The raw emotion in his voice caught me by surprise. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. "You won't," I finally whispered. "But we have to be careful for both our sakes." The next few days were tense. Claire didn't say anything to Nathan. At least, not that I knew of, but the feeling of her suspicion followed me like a dark cloud. Liam tried to calm me down, but even he seemed more nervous than usual. Then, one evening, Nathan came home earlier than expected. I was in the laundry room with Liam, standing closer than we should have, when we heard the front door open. We jumped apart like we were in trouble. "Sophia!" Nathan called, his voice echoing through the house. "In here," I replied, trying to stay calm even though my heart was racing. Nathan walked into the room, his eyes scanning everything. For a second, I thought he might say something, but then he just nodded. "Is dinner ready?" I asked quickly, trying to change the subject. "Almost," I said, and Nathan left without saying anything else. But the look he gave me stayed with me long after he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in the laundry room, the way Nathan's eyes stayed on me just a little too long. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. And yet, even with everything happening, I couldn't make myself end things. Whatever was going on between Liam and me felt too big to just walk away from. But deep down, I knew the worst wasn't over. It was just starting. It all began when Nathan came home early again, but this time, It wasn't just the timing that threw me off. His face was tight, and he set his briefcase down with a loud thud. "Liam!" Nathan called, his voice sharp and making my stomach drop. Liam showed up in the hallway moments later, looking relaxed compared to Nathan's obvious anger. "What's up?" he asked, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "We need to talk. Now." His voice left no room for arguing. Liam looked at me briefly, concern flashing in his eyes before following Nathan into the living room. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my heart pounding. At first, I couldn't hear them clearly, just Nathan's deep voice and Liam's quieter replies. But as the conversation got louder, the words started to make sense. "I know what's been going on," Nathan said, his voice cold as ice. "What are you talking about?" Liam replied, sounding calm but guarded. "Don't play dumb with me," Nathan snapped. "I've seen the way you look at her, and the way she looks at you. Do you think I'm blind?" My blood ran cold. He knew, or at least he suspected enough to confront Liam. "Nathan, you're imagining things," Liam said, his voice steadier than I expected. "There's nothing going on." "Don't lie to me," Nathan yelled. I heard something break, maybe a glass. I couldn't stay hidden anymore. I stepped into the doorway, my hands shaking. "Nathan, stop!" I shouted. Both men turned to face me, their expressions completely different. Nathan's face was full of anger and betrayal, while Liam looked like he was standing his ground. "Sophia?" Nathan said, his voice quieter but still filled with danger. "Tell me the truth. Is there something going on between you two?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My silence was my answer. Nathan laughed bitterly, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I knew it," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. "Nathan, please," I said, stepping closer to him. "Don't," he cut me off, holding up a hand. "Don't try to explain it. There's nothing you can say that will make this okay." The room went silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock. Finally, Nathan turned to Liam, his eyes filled with rage. "You're out," Nathan said coldly. "Pack your things and leave tonight." Liam didn't move, his jaw tightening. "I'm not going anywhere." "Yes, you are," Nathan shot back. "You're not staying under my roof and disrespecting me like this." "I think you should calm down," Liam said, his voice low but firm. That only made Nathan angrier. He stepped closer to Liam, his fists clenched. "Don't tell me to calm down, you little— Stop it!" I shouted, stepping between them. "Both of you, just stop." Nathan turned to me, his eyes full of pain. "How could you, Sophia?" he asked, his voice shaking. "After everything I've done for you?" "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, tears flowing down my face. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did," Nathan said bitterly. "And now I have to deal with the fact that my own wife and my son—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I can't even say it." Liam reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't let him touch me, not now, not with Nathan watching. "I think it's best if I leave," I said quietly. Nathan looked at me, his face growing colder. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "This is my house. If anyone's leaving, it's him." "Nathan, I started, but he cut me off. "No," he said. "I don't want to hear it. You've made your choice, Sophia, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." That night, Liam left. He packed a bag without saying a word, his movements stiff and robotic. I followed him to the driveway, my heart breaking with every step. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears falling down my face. He turned to me, his face softer than I thought it would be. "This isn't over," he said, his voice calm. "You know that, right?" I nodded but didn't say anything. As much as I wanted to believe him, I wasn't sure if it was true. As his car drove away, I felt a deep ache in my chest, a mix of guilt, loss, and something else I couldn't name. The days after were unbearable. Nathan barely spoke to me. His silence hurt more than any words could. I tried to keep busy with household tasks, but nothing helped. The emptiness inside me wouldn't go away. Then, a week later, the letter came. It was from Liam. There was no return address, just my name written in his familiar handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart racing as I unfolded the paper. "Sophia," the letter began. "I know things are complicated right now, but I need you to know that I meant what I said. This isn't over. I don't care what anyone else thinks or says. I can't just walk away from you. I won't. When you're ready, I'll be waiting. Always." I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to tear it up, burn it, and pretend it never existed. But another part of me, a part I didn't want to admit, held onto his words like a lifeline. That night, I tucked the letter into the back of my dresser drawer, hiding it away like a secret I wasn't ready to share with anyone. Because deep down, I knew Liam was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We value your opinion in comment section. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.